When you think about America in the 1960s, the images that often pop into mind are tie-dyed shirts swirling in a haze of protest signs, rock and roll blasting from transistor radios, and astronauts planting flags on the moon like they were staking out a new backyard. But let's peel back the layers a bit, because the decade wasn't just a psychedelic postcard. There were plenty of undercurrents and everyday realities that history books gloss over, the kind of details that make you realize how much has changed, and how some things haven't. For starters, while the counterculture grabbed the headlines, most Americans were still buttoned up in their routines, far from the flower power frenzy. It's almost comical how we've romanticized the era as one big Woodstock, when in truth, the average Joe was more likely tuning into The Andy Griffith Show than dropping acid at a love-in. Take daily life, for instance. In the early 1960s, the suburban dream was exploding like a fireworks show on the 4th of July. Families were flocking to cookie-cutter houses in places like Levittown, where white picket fences symbolized stability after the post-war boom. But what nobody tells you is how isolating that could be. Moms were often stuck at home with the latest appliances, think avocado green refrigerators and electric can openers, while dads commuted to office jobs in their fin-tailed Cadillacs. Gas was cheap, around 30 cents a gallon, so nobody batted an eye at those gas guzzlers. Yet, beneath the shiny surface, there was a quiet unease. The nuclear family ideal masked rising divorce rates, which started creeping up from the 1950s lows. And let's not forget the bomb shelters. With the Cold War simmering, many backyards hid concrete bunkers stocked with canned goods, just in case the Soviets decided to turn the world into a radioactive barbecue. It's funny in hindsight, people drilling holes in their lawns for doomsday prep while kids played hopscotch above potential apocalypse hideouts. Technology in the 1960s wasn't the sci-fi wonderland we imagine. Sure, the space race was on, but on the ground, things were decidedly low-tech by today's standards. Telephones were tethered to walls with curly cords that could stretch maybe 10 feet if you were lucky, and making a long-distance call felt like a special occasion, complete with operator assistance and hefty bills. No cell phones meant if you were out and about, you were truly off the grid. Imagine telling a kid today that you couldn't just text your mom from the mall. Television was black and white for most of the decade until color sets became affordable around 1965, and even then, only 3 major networks dominated: ABC, CBS, and NBC. Families gathered around the glowing box for shows like Bonanza or The Twilight Zone. But reception often required adjusting rabbit ear antennas, leading to more than a few frustrated slaps on the TV set. Computers? They were room-sized behemoths in government labs, not something you'd find on a desk. The IBM 1401, a popular model, processed data on punch cards. Think of it as the dinosaur ancestor of your laptop, clunky and prone to overheating like an old uncle at a family reunion. Food and dining habits reveal another hidden layer. The 1960s saw the rise of convenience foods, thanks to innovations like Tang, the orange drink astronauts supposedly loved, and instant mashed potatoes. But home cooking was still king, with recipes from Betty Crocker cookbooks featuring gelatin salads that encased everything from vegetables to tuna. Yes, Jell-O molds were a thing, and they wobbled their way through countless potlucks. Fast food was emerging. McDonald's golden arches were spreading, but a hamburger cost about 15 cents, and drive-ins like A&W offered root beer floats served by car hops on roller skates. What gets overlooked is the nutritional naivety. Smoking was ubiquitous, even encouraged in ads, and pregnant women puffing away on cigarettes wasn't uncommon, as if morning sickness needed a side of nicotine. Doctors sometimes recommended it for stress relief. Talk about a prescription for disaster. Seat belts? They were optional add-ons in cars until 1968, when they became mandatory in new vehicles, but enforcement was lax. Kids rode shotgun without car seats, bouncing around like pinballs on road trips. It's a wonder more didn't end up with bumps and bruises, or worse. Education in the 1960s had its own quirks that seem archaic now. Schools were segregated in many parts until the Civil Rights Act of 1964 started forcing changes, but integration was a slow, contentious process. Classrooms featured wooden desks with inkwells, though ballpoint pens were taking over, and discipline involved paddles or rulers. Corporal punishment was standard, and nobody thought twice about a teacher whacking a misbehaving student. Textbooks glorified American history with a heavy dose of patriotism, glossing over Native American displacement or slavery's horrors. For girls, home economics classes taught sewing and cooking, reinforcing gender roles, while boys learned shop skills like woodworking. College was becoming more accessible, thanks to the GI Bill's lingering effects, but tuition was dirt cheap, around $500 a year at public universities. Yet, the draft loomed for young men, pulling many into Vietnam before they could graduate. Protests on campuses like Berkeley's free speech movement in 1964 highlighted growing dissent, but most students were more focused on sock hops and fraternities than revolution. Speaking of the counterculture, here's where myths run rampant. The narrative often paints the entire decade as a hippie utopia, with everyone sporting long hair, peace signs, and communal living. In reality, the hippie movement was a fringe phenomenon, peaking around 1967's Summer of Love in San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury. Most Americans viewed it with suspicion or outright disdain. Think of your conservative grandparents shaking their heads at those long-haired weirdos. Tie-dye and bell-bottoms didn't dominate wardrobes until the late 60s, and even then, only among the youth in urban areas. The silent majority, as Nixon later called them, stuck to crew cuts, suits, and dresses that hit below the knee. Music shifted from doo-wop to rock, with the Beatles invading in 1964, but radio stations played everything from Motown hits to folk tunes. Drugs like LSD were experimental among artists and intellectuals, but widespread use was exaggerated. Marijuana was still underground, and possession could land you in jail. The sexual revolution was brewing, with the pill approved in 1960, but premarital sex remained taboo in polite society, leading to shotgun weddings and hushed abortions. The civil rights movement is often boiled down to Martin Luther King Jr.'s "I Have a Dream" speech and Rosa Parks' bus boycott, but the gritty details reveal a nation deeply divided. Jim Crow laws in the South enforced segregation in everything from water fountains to schools, and violence was rampant. Think Birmingham's fire hoses and attack dogs in 1963. What gets less attention is the economic angle. African Americans faced redlining in housing, barring them from suburbs, and job discrimination kept wages low. The March on Washington in 1963 wasn't just about dreams. It was for jobs and freedom. Meanwhile, in the North, de facto segregation persisted in cities like Chicago, where riots erupted in 1966 over housing issues. Malcolm X's assassination in 1965 and King's in 1968 ignited urban unrest, with over 100 cities burning in the long hot summers. Native Americans and Latinos also pushed for rights. The American Indian movement formed in 1968, and Cesar Chavez led farm worker strikes. Women's rights simmered too. Betty Friedan's The Feminine Mystique in 1963 exposed the problem that has no name, the dissatisfaction of housewives, but feminism was still nascent, with equal pay laws only passing in 1963. Politically, the 1960s were a roller coaster that makes modern elections look tame. John F. Kennedy's Camelot image hid health issues like Addison's disease and back problems, managed with painkillers. His 1960 win over Nixon was razor-thin, amid allegations of vote fraud in Illinois and Texas. Some say Chicago's dead voted early and often. JFK's assassination in 1963 spawned conspiracy theories that persist, from the grassy knoll to CIA involvement. Lyndon B. Johnson stepped in, pushing the Great Society programs like Medicare and Medicaid in 1965, which transformed welfare but ballooned the budget. Vietnam escalated under LBJ, from 16,000 advisors in 1963 to over 500,000 troops by 1968. The draft lottery, introduced in 1969, added a lottery-like dread to young men's lives. Low numbers meant boots on the ground in jungles fighting an elusive enemy. Anti-war protests grew, but so did support for the troops. It wasn't all doves versus hawks. Nixon's 1968 election capitalized on law and order fears amid riots and assassinations. Economically, the decade was a mixed bag often overshadowed by the glamour. The post-war boom continued, with GDP growth averaging 4.4% annually, but inflation started creeping up by the late 60s. Unemployment hovered around 5%, and the minimum wage rose to $1.25 an hour in 1966, enough for a modest life. But poverty affected 22% of Americans in 1960, dropping to 12% by 1969 thanks to war on poverty initiatives. What nobody emphasizes is the environmental awakening. Rachel Carson's Silent Spring in 1962 exposed pesticide dangers, leading to the EPA's creation in 1970. But in the 60s, rivers like the Cuyahoga caught fire from pollution, and smog-choked cities like Los Angeles. Consumerism ruled, with shopping malls popping up. Southdale Center in Minnesota, the first enclosed mall, opened in 1956 but boomed in the 60s. Credit cards like Bank AmeriCard, precursor to Visa, debuted in 1958, but widespread use came later, meaning most transactions were cash or check. Sports and leisure offer lighter insights into the era's soul. Baseball was America's pastime, with Roger Maris breaking Babe Ruth's home run record in 1961 amid asterisk controversies because the season was longer. The NFL-AFL merger in 1966 birthed the Super Bowl, first played in 1967. But hidden gems include the rise of surfing culture in California, inspired by Beach Boys tunes, or the twist dance craze started by Chubby Checker in 1960, getting even middle-aged folks gyrating at parties. Vacations often meant road trips in station wagons, piled with kids and luggage, stopping at Howard Johnson's for ice cream. Amusement parks like Disneyland, opened 1955, drew crowds, but Six Flags Over Texas debuted in 1961, blending history with thrills. Health and medicine advanced, but with blind spots. Polio vaccines by Salk and Sabin eradicated the disease by the mid-60s, a triumph after iron lung fears. Heart transplants began in 1967, though early patients didn't survive long. Mental health was stigmatized, lobotomies were still performed until the late 60s, and institutions warehoused the afflicted. Thalidomide scandals in Europe influenced U.S. drug regulations, but smoking's dangers were just emerging. The Surgeon General's 1964 report linked it to cancer, yet ads continued until 1971. Diets were heavy on red meat and carbs. Low-fat trends hadn't hit yet. The space race captivated the nation, but lesser known is the human cost. Apollo 1's 1967 fire killed 3 astronauts during a test, a setback amid the rush to beat the Soviets. Neil Armstrong's 1969 moonwalk was watched by 600 million worldwide, but back home, some criticized the billions spent while poverty persisted. Gil Scott-Heron's poem, Whitey on the Moon, captured that irony. Innovations like Velcro and Tang spun off from NASA, but Tang was actually developed earlier for general use. Fashion evolved subtly. Early 60s saw Jackie Kennedy's pillbox hats and shift dresses, elegant and modest. By mid-decade, miniskirts from Mary Quant shocked conservatives, hemlines rising to thigh-high by 1968. Men's suits slimmed down, influenced by mod style from Britain. Hair got longer for both genders, but not universally. Many workplaces banned beards until the 70s. Media shaped perceptions, with Walter Cronkite's CBS Evening News trusted like gospel. Magazines like Life captured iconic photos, from Vietnam's horrors to civil rights marches. Underground press like The Village Voice offered alternative views, but censorship lingered. Books like Tropic of Cancer fought obscenity trials. Immigration shifted with the 1965 Hart-Celler Act, ending national origin quotas and opening doors to Asians and Latinos, diversifying the melting pot. But nativist backlash simmered. In entertainment, Hollywood transitioned from studio system to new wave films like Bonnie and Clyde in 1967, with graphic violence shocking audiences. Broadway hits like Hello, Dolly contrasted with off-Broadway experimentation. The environmental movement gained traction post-Carson's book, leading to Earth Day in 1970, but 60s activism laid groundwork with Clean Air Acts. LGBTQ rights stirred with the 1969 Stonewall riots, but before that, raids on gay bars were routine, and homosexuality was classified as a mental illness until 1973. Native American activism ramped up, with the Alcatraz occupation in 1969 symbolizing land claims. The decade's end saw Altamont's deadly concert in 1969, contrasting Woodstock's peace, signaling the dream's fraying. Reflecting on it all, the 1960s weren't just revolution. They were evolution, with everyday Americans navigating change amid turmoil. The myths of universal rebellion ignore the conservative backbone that persisted. It's almost amusing how we've airbrushed the grit, the smoky rooms, the unsafe roads, the simmering tensions, into a groovy nostalgia. But understanding these hidden facets reminds us that progress is messy, and history's lessons are often whispered, not shouted.